My name is Michael Mullins. I'm a longtime healthcare M&A banker. Recently teamed up with Scale to help on M&A transactions, mostly sell sides for healthcare services companies. And prior to this, I was with Goldman and Houlihan Lokey. So today we're going to talk about value-based care, which is even a hard thing to define. It means something different to almost everyone you speak to. And I want it to be a little bit kind of an open conversation. We've got a few different perspectives up here. The perspective of the provider or the clinician. I've never set foot on a campus of a medical school, so it's totally acting, but I have been grilled by many physician groups over time. So I'll allow my distinguished panelists to introduce themselves briefly, and we'll dive right in.
Great. Great to see everybody today. I'm Daniel Vernick. I'm the CEO of the Oncology Institute. We're a company that's been around for about 18 years, although we've been a public company now for 4 years. We're a multi-state medical and radiation oncology provider. We operate in 5 states, primarily employed with a wrap MSO model in select markets. Our unique niche in oncology is we're the largest value-based oncology platform in the country. We take Part B risk on about 2.1 million lives. That's across product types, Medicare Advantage, commercial HMO, and managed Medicaid. Great to see you all today.
I'm Rachel Winokur, founder and CEO of Taylor Care. We take end-to-end risk on musculoskeletal spend on behalf of payers and risk-based primary care groups. What we do is really care navigation, engagement, working closely with the individuals, both on a commercial and Medicare side. And then we also drive real value to providers by really doing a great job at screening and matching patients to them. And then our payer is obviously designed to create a better experience, but ultimately save money. And that's what we've been demonstrating to do that. We're live in Georgia, and we are launching in Texas and Colorado in the next month or two, and then about 10 more markets going into 2026.
Great. Hi, nice to be here. Thanks for the invitation. Liz Fowler, former director of the CMS Innovation Center. Just really pleased to be here, having visited one of the oncology sites in Las Vegas and very familiar with Taylor Care and new to the Scale community. So nice to be here. Thank you.
Hi, Scott Hayworth. I'm a physician by training. I grew Caremount Medical for 23 years as CEO, sold to Optum 5 years ago, had 3 roles at Optum, including running one of the 5 regions in the country for Optum Health. And then on top of that was the National Chief Physician Liaison Officer for Optum Health. And then Hayworth Ventures is really my private family office. I do boards now, and I work with a private equity firm called GTCR out of Chicago.
Good. So I'm going to pick on Liz really quickly. She has to leave a little early, but Liz, could you give us, before we start the deeper conversation, how do you define value-based care? What is that?
I think of it as an alignment of incentives. I think of it as where the providers agree with the payers that there needs to be a better way to provide services that's more sort of patient-centered, team-based, and where the financials are such that if there's less care delivered and it's more efficient and better for the patients in terms of outcomes, everybody wins. I don't know if that's how others would define it, but that's how I think of it in my mind anyways.
Good. So Daniel, with your role in oncology, define value-based care for an oncologist. You're in a meeting. You're speaking to a physician.
Yep.
Help him to understand translate what Liz just said.
Yeah, for me, fundamentally, value is quality over cost. And the great news is that in oncology, for those that aren't aware, you can really maximize quality while lowering cost. And that relates to specialty-specific issues related to guidelines around prescribing patterns and the kind of broad gray area for almost every cancer type when it comes to therapeutic selection, as well as how long you keep a patient on therapeutics and how their disease is responding. So you truly can have great clinical outcomes and lower cost. And that's our pitch.
Good. How's it been working?
It's been working great. I mean, I think, again, every, and I'm speaking as a physician by background as well, every specialty has its own misalignment of incentives. In oncology, the reimbursement model is, 90% of your revenue is based on drugs. There's basically a 6% spread if you're a fee-for-service practice on those drugs. So naturally, if you want to maximize your P&L, you prescribe the most drugs possible and the most expensive drugs you can. And I think for a lot of physicians, that's pretty distasteful, especially when their compensation might be rewarded based on, overprescribing or overutilizing. So we've had tremendous success. Again, 90+% of our physicians are employed in our model in terms of recruiting, because fundamentally we practice in a way that I think is aligned to how people train in medical school and fellowship. And that's just doing the right thing for patients. And that includes not just cost savings, but again, higher quality care.
Absolutely. So Rachel, quickly, to implement an effective value-based care plan, there's financial transformations, clinical transformations. How does Taylor Care approach that when you're partnering?
Yeah, so we had the benefit of starting the company and really, I'd say, kind of breaking open how musculoskeletal care is managed within a value-based care world, because not many companies had been really attempting it. MSK is different from most other clinical areas, particularly things like oncology or when you get into kidney disease and other areas where there really has been a concerted effort, because it's a very broad swath of the population that actually suffers from some sort of MSK-related condition. It's up to 50% in a Medicare population, but it is a small percentage of their total medical spend, think 10 to 15%. So in order for you to manage that patient population, you're not taking ownership of the total clinical management of a patient. You're really managing a slice over a large population. And so, as an example, we're in Atlanta, and in our market, there are, 100,000 people that are actually within our risk pool, 40,000 of which, 40 to 50, are going to actually have some sort of MSK related issue. We need to know who those people are, and we need to get to them to make sure that they've got the appropriate amount of care and the appropriate course of care with the appropriate providers that can deliver that care in the most effective way. And so when I think about where we have been able to benefit is that we have been able to create this model as opposed to leveraging an existing model and trying to then tweak it for the specifics of musculoskeletal. It also allows us to deliver a clinical pathway that is highly aligned to the evidence-based guidelines, but also aligned to how providers think about delivering care. So we're not causing providers to transform and change how they deliver care. We're actually just helping get them the right patients so that they can do the jobs that they know how to do and keep people out of their panels who are not appropriate for the kind of care that they deliver.
Great. So Scott, really quickly to you, from a former CEO of a very large provider organization and ultimately with a transaction to United, how does a clinical organization, how do they know they're ready to take risk?
So it's tough. First of all, running a large multi-specialty group, there's advantages and disadvantages over single specialty. I think single specialty is easier in one sense because everyone's rowing in the same direction. But being a multi-specialty group, we're able to control all the costs, except for pharma. So we actually, the year before we sold, we were the most successful next-gen ACO, if those of you who can remember next-gen ACOs in the country. And so we were very good at keeping people out of the hospital and keeping down costs. It has to come down to education of the physicians and making sure your compensation model goes along with what you're trying to preach. It's very tough having two legs in different canoes, one at fee-for-service and one at risk. So you got to make sure that all that.
How, if you're able to share and provide any insight, when you were pitching this transaction to your shareholders, how did you do that? How did you convince them that this was the right direction?
You mean the sale?
Yes.
Well, obviously a lot of education. First of all, it's funny, we can all be speaking, everyone in this room all over the country. And one of my friends always said, you're never a prophet in your own land. So first of all, you need to pull some consultants in. We use Kane as our investment banker. We use Shepherd Mullen as our law firm. So I made sure we brought people in who could help educate the physicians, because it was just me and the executive team trying to educate the board and the physicians. It wouldn't work. So first of all, you have to sort of sell the environment and what's going on. And then after you sell the environment, then you sell the transaction.
Absolutely. And just from my experience, I think one of the big challenges I have in working with physician groups in any transaction is the lack of preparation, a strategic plan, a clear alignment to their vision, their mission, and what they're looking to accomplish before you start to talk specifically about any particular transaction, because then you kind of get lost in the objectives you're trying to accomplish.
I was also chairman of the board of U.S. Digestive Health, which is a large PE-backed GI roll-up in Pennsylvania and Delaware. And they came together as one group, but they really were three separate groups that we put together, put the infrastructure in place, and grew over 5 years. We sold them to Optum in January, too. So I'm now looking for my third transaction to Optum. But you get good at them after a while. We had, even though they had sold themselves once, and we were the second transaction then to sell them to Optum, you still have the same education process. It is a little easier because once doctors have sold once, they've given up some of their freedom, that you can sort of sell a transaction easier than it is the first time.
Absolutely. So for me, when I look at healthcare, just because coming in as a layman finance guy, longtime analyst, I look, it's kind of a envision a forest. And every time a new hot topic comes up, like meaningful use in EMRs and now AI, like value-based care to me is like one of those trees in the forest that, you have to look at, you have to address, but you can't do it in isolation. And so I really think striking a balanced approach to an organization and approaching value-based care, AI, any other affiliation models, whatever, has to be balanced. So Liz, I want to ask you a quick question. There's 5,000 hospitals in the U.S., plus or minus. There are 300 plus thousand physician groups in the U.S., medical groups. And so when we think about value-based care and we're trying to get more groups on board and to embrace it, to understand it in the major cities and the rural areas, give us your perspective on how this group can better do that.
So I think value-based care has been more of a voluntary exercise to date, where CMMI puts out a model. The CMS program has the Medicare Shared Savings Program. You come in, if you decide you're going to be successful, you've done the numbers, you think I can win at this game and reduce costs, improve quality, meet the metrics, be successful. If you run the numbers and you can't, you don't join. Or if you're not winning the way that you thought you would, maybe the rules change, which is another set of questions and problems, but you drop out. And so it's been sort of like, it's limited, I think, group that wants to jump in, growing, but not as fast as maybe we wanted. I think what will accelerate that process is probably looking at mandatory models, which CMS is starting to do now. The team model that goes into effect in January that we had launched and this administration is keeping is a mandatory episode-based care model for 6 surgical episodes. They've just announced a new episode ambulatory, the ASM model, specialty model, which is mandatory for fee-for-service specialty. And I think they're looking for more opportunities to sort of force the hand of providers to come in who have been reluctant. I think as we thought about team, we have to think about, you can't throw something out there where people are unsuccessful and have a bad experience. And then there's political opposition and everyone aligns against it. So have to think really carefully about what that transition looks like. But just adding one piece to the whole, why is all of this important? We talked over lunch about telehealth. Like, why is telehealth not permanent? Why are we not doing telehealth? Why isn't Congress authorizing that to be permanent? If you bring something into fee-for-service Medicare, it's just going to be inflationary. It's not a substitution for coming to the doctor. It's an addition. And then people figure out how to bill it, how to maximize it. And the incentive in our healthcare system is to do more of it. Under value-based care, where you have the incentive to maybe use it wisely, to deploy it in areas where it makes sense, where it's better for patients, you can see that it's actually something that you would want to have as part of your toolkit or your toolbox to be able to better serve patients. And so that, I think, is also, just keep in mind how we think of value-based care and why we need to be accelerating it and move completely out of fee-for-service and really into value-based care.